Good afternoon. My name is Tom Suter. I am the founder and CEO of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and welcome to something we've actually been planning for quite some time. We call it's the Small Micro Agency Chief Information Security Officers Council, SMAC for short. And this summit is called Small Agencies, Big Ideas. And it's been something I've been working on a long time. It's personally a passion of mine. These small agencies service our constituents in private industry and citizens, and they are very, very important. And sometimes they don't have all the resources that some of the bigger agencies, CFO Act agencies have. So we're really excited about this. A little about ATARC. It's the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. We're a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia. And when I'm talking about SMAC, I specifically would like to thank Alan Concor, who's helped put us together this program. There he is, Alan. How are you doing there, my friend?
Very good. How about yourself?
Good, good. So he's going to give us our visionary keynote in just a second. I want to remind everybody it's going to be a great day. We're going to have a couple of panels for you. We're going to have some poll questions that are very critical to us giving out CPE credits, but it should be a very interactive day. And as always, we're going to have some open-ended questions that you can ask while you have all these great thought leaders on this. But anyway, our keynote speaker today is Alan Concor, the aforementioned. Alan is the Division Chief of the Office of Innovation, Strategy, and Security within the Department of State. And Alan is also the SMAC Community Lead. Alan, welcome, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you, my friend.
Thank you. First of all, I will say I'm humbled to be here. The SMAC is funny. The small and micro agency CISO community literally is something I stumbled onto when I was the CISO over at the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, now which is called the DFC. And you know, back then, and this was back in 2012, really it was very hard for the small and micros to have a voice across the community, along with being able to articulate to OMB, GSA, and even to DHS some of the challenges that really existed for the smalls. When I was at OPIC and the CISO, I tried herding cats and essentially kickstarted or resuscitated, I should say, an old distro list that had existed in GSA, and started what I will call a long journey. Believe it or not, the small micro agency community right now makes up about 150 plus agencies, ranging anywhere from a 2-person commission all the way up to about 5,000 people. But I'm not that shy. I mean, if other agencies that are not part of the CFO, CIO community or CISO community want to join the panel, I'm very open to it. So we do have agencies. I mean, I bet the running joke, I think, in the community is, if you give us an acronym, I bet you we can come up with an agency. Is there are lots of different agencies that have lots of great missions, really a lot of citizen first type of efforts, which I think are very valuable and noble. I don't want to name, I can't name all of them, obviously, but some of the folks that are here on the panel today, or the panels today, are representative of those smalls, and they're really great folks, because the community in general is extremely collaborative. We are always share information together. We share documents. We actually run ideas past each other. We try and do collaborative work in a lot of different ways. And you know, together, I think the community has really helped make sure that the DHS teams, OMB, and the rest of the government leadership really see and hear some of the challenges that are facing the small and micro agency community. The two panels today are going to be very interesting, because there are two things that have been, the SolarWinds hack is one thing, But we've gotten a number of those types of attacks over the last few years, and the small and micros have had to really pull together to essentially mitigate a lot of those challenges. The collaboration issue is, I think, one that's not only impacting the smalls, but I think that's more government wide. But the smalls, you know, the one credit I will definitely give them is the smalls are very innovative because they're able to do more with less. That's pretty much what I should say. But anyway, I really don't have much else to say. So I think I will turn it back over to Tom. But again, thank you for taking the time, and you know, thank you.
And Alan, I think there's like what 150 micro agencies.
There's yeah, it's roughly about 150 plus. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, it's a running joke. We can probably give an acronym and we can find an agency. And some of them most of them are here in DC, but they're spread out across the country, everywhere from California to Chicago. I mean, you name it, a city, we probably have a small micro there.
Great, great. Well, we'll just dive into our first panel. I think you're on it. If my panelists can come on, we're going to talk a little bit about the SolarWinds hack, which is big enough for a large agency. If you're a small agency, I'd imagine it'd be more challenging. So just real quick, we've got Alan Concor. We just heard from him, but he's Division Chief, Office of Innovation, Strategy and Security, United States Department of State, and SMAC Community Lead. And I've got a new thing that I'm starting before I do these things. Alan, welcome. And what is something good to happen to you today that you can share with everybody? What good thing has happened to you today?
Well, the kids actually came down, didn't bother me today while I was on a Zoom meeting. So that's a good thing, I guess.
Thank God for small miracles, right? Yes. And we also have with us Ralph Mosios, who's the Chief Information Security Officer from the Federal Housing Finance Agency. How are you doing today, Ralph?
Great, thank you for being here.
Great. And it looks like you're working from home, I take it. Where is home?
And I have to say that I am wearing a tie, not a tie, but a shirt and a button-down shirt, which is very unusual for me. Over the last 15 months, the most I've got dressed up would be a button-down shirt. That's as far as it goes. But I went the extra mile just for you, Tom, to wear a sport jacket. So
I like it. I like it. And I'm not going to ask you whether you're wearing shorts or jeans or something. And your wife, I didn't want to presume it was your wife, but the artwork in the back looks kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. My wife is an art teacher, but that's not her painting. So she found it someplace she liked it. Said this would be good to study. So here it is.
And that's fantastic. So what good has happened to you today? And I don't think putting on a proper jacket is going to cut it.
So what good? Like Alan, most of my kids are out of the house, but I only had to walk the dogs once today, as opposed to 3 times before 12 o'clock. Get up real early to walk them, but my daughter's back home with us, so she was nice enough to take care of that.
Great, great. And last, but certainly not least, we have with us Sean Connelly, who's TIC Program Manager, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And one thing before I talk to you, Sean, I know you care about small agencies, because I think when I pitched the small agency CISO Council, the need for this event, I think you were before me or after me or something. So I know you spend a lot of time. How are you doing today, Sean?
Hey, doing well. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, Alan and I go back 15 plus years, and he's been leading this small agency council for what, 8-9 years now, Alan, and he's really been a leader and a voice for the smalls, and it's been a fun ride with him, working with him on the smalls. Like you said, there's a unique set of challenges that the smalls have, and so certainly eager to be in this discussion to help them.
Great, great. And what good has happened to you today? What good thing?
Yeah, I got an easy one. So my wife's a teacher in Alexandria school system, and she's been going back for a couple of weeks now. But this morning, I was able to take my son back to school, and he's only on his 2nd week going back to school. But, one small step, returning normalcy, getting him, shuffle him off to school there. So back to that path again, right?
That's fantastic, fantastic. Well, maybe we can start off with you, Ralph. let us know a little bit about your agency and some of the things you're dealing with. You know, cybersecurity, obviously, specifically, but in regards to this attack. But you don't have to limit it to that.
Sure. So actually, before we actually get into the subject at hand, life, after the SolarWinds hack, I do want to echo what Sean mentioned and really thank Alan, our keynote speaker. Alan and I go back a long time, probably right around when the Small Agency CISO Council was formed in 2012. And those of us that benefit from this program really attribute that success to Alan, because he has been the driving force. He has sent out tons of emails, shared information, and collaboration, set up hundreds, if not more, vendor demos and presentations. So, and all of that coming from Alan. He's kind of steering the boat on this. And the fact of the matter is, he doesn't work for a small agency, right? Because the Department of State is not considered a small agency. So it's really no surprise that back in 2020, last year, that Alan was nominated as a top 50 leader by Feds Group. So really, I want to just take this opportunity on behalf of my distinguished colleagues that are attending today, and those of us in the small and the micro agencies want to thank Alan for a great job. And I wish I could present him with a gift or a token of appreciation, but I guess he's just going to have to settle for a virtual thank you. So Alan, once again, thank you so much for all that you do for us. So
it's my pleasure. I mean, you guys deserve it. I mean, this is one thing I could do, so I'm happy to do it. So
Great, thank you.
You guys
Thank you for
really
that,
are
Ralph.
the ones that are making the community. It's not me. I mean, without your contributions, this wouldn't be successful. So it really is for you. I mean, sure, I am a little bit of a spammer. I will be the first to admit it. But I am also a real pain in some people's behinds. But because I'm at state, I have a little more leeway that I can kind of do that. So anyway, thank you again, Ralph, and thank you for the community.
Great.
Much appreciated.
Great, Ralph. And you didn't cede any minutes here. That was like you get a freebie there.
okay, it's a pretty good thing. Well, I don't want to take too much time, but let me take a step back here and just talk a little bit about my background, where I'm coming from, because I kind of work across different industries and sectors. So for the past 10 years, I've been the CISO, the Chief Information Officer, Security Officer at the Federal Housing Finance Agency. Before that, I spent 6 years at the Securities and Exchange Commission, and then I spent some quality time as a consultant with IBM, Pricewaterhouse, and the field office. And then before that, about 13 years working for the Navy. So needless to say, I've been around the block a few times, and it's obviously starting to show because I am losing my hair far faster than I really care to. So I work as Alan indicated before. Some of us, we work in a smaller or micro agency. So my organization is around roughly 800 people, but we kind of fill a big role. We're a relatively new organization. So I figure it might be worth spending a few minutes just talking about who we are and what we do. And then I could jump into a little bit about some of the challenges we face at my organization. So I work for the Federal Housing Finance Agency. We are a financial regulator. We have two primary roles. One is to be the regulator for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and 11 federal home loan banks. That's one particular role. And then we inherited, or we kind of took it upon ourselves to implement yet another role called a conservator. So back in 2000, I guess it was 8 or so, just as the financial market was just about to burst, the financial crisis that we all lived through, the two big entities, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they were hemorrhaging. They were losing a significant amount of money, roughly about $190 billion they lost in a very short period of time. So my organization was only in existence for 3 months. So we took them on, we basically took them under what's called conservatorship. We took them as sort of pseudo-government entities, even though they were like that before. But we sort of, I will say, we eliminated their board of directors, and then we actually became their board of directors when those folks were gone. And conservatorship was intended to be a short-term venture. And fast forward to 2021, right, where we are today, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are still in conservatorship. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because of the impact that these organizations and the rest of the federal home loan bank system, right? If you start to take all of those entities together, they administer $6.6 trillion worth of mortgages. I know a lot of people, those of us on the call have mortgages. So that's some pocket change, $6.6 trillion. So even though we are a small organization, we have our hands in a lot of different areas. So shifting gears a little bit, now I'd like to talk about some of the challenges that we are facing from my perspective as a small agency, which may sort of trickle into some of the larger agencies. So it may sound sort of innocuous, but it is a challenge for us that we have sort of I call it a lack of common understanding of IT priorities, right?
Yep.
We have the IT operations folks on one side, they are pushing out new technology that my team, the cyber team, has to test and make sure it's secure, right? We have on the other side, we have the application development team that, of course, they're building, they're developing software and iOS applications that, again, that my team has to test and secure. And then we have the cybersecurity team that we have our own priorities that we're trying to push out our own technology and move to enhance some of our cybersecurity capabilities. So that kind of causes us to try to help, causes us some challenges sometimes trying to figure out what are the true priorities that we face. And again, it's probably not unique to a small agency, but as a small agency, I am very limited to the number of resources. And then, as we go along and talk through the panel a little bit later on, we could talk about some of the specific technology or cybersecurity challenges that we face. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Tom.
We actually got a question real quick while I got you on. How long, and I didn't know this until you said it, how long will they stay in conservatorship, and what are the benchmarks to end it? Good question, actually.
That's an excellent question. That is a question that's been pondered for many years. The intent was to keep them in conservatorship for roughly a couple of years, but it's been very difficult because you can't just, they need a significant amount of capital to fill that void, and you can't just turn that loose to government. So I am not necessarily involved on that. There are plans to try and release them from conservatorship, but I couldn't tell you when it's going to happen and how long it's going to take. But it does require a significant amount of capital. Again, if out of the $6.6 trillion that I talked about, both Fannie and Freddie, they account for probably about half of that. So that's right. That's probably more than you make, Tom. I'm just guessing, but over $3 trillion, right?
Just a little bit. Hey, by the way, Ralph, you unintentionally just renamed this event from now on. We had small agencies, big ideas. I like small agencies, big impact. That's a better. You guys, even though they're smaller agencies, they have a huge ripple effect throughout the United States. So thank you for renaming it. That was a good idea. Next, we'll go with Sean Connelly with CISA. Love to hear your perspectives.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So my name is Sean Connelly with CISA. I lead the TIC program, Trusted Internet Connections. The TIC initiative has been around since 2007 or 8, since Karen Evans led the team at OMB. But really, we had a reset in about 2019. In September of 2019, OMB released memo 1926, update the TIC initiative. And that really was a culmination of maybe 3 to 4 years worth of effort. We worked with a number of agencies, the greater IT community, vendors, and really updating the whole philosophy and journey with TIC. And so when OMB released the memo, then fairly quickly after that, my team at CISA, we released guidance. We released the final version of that guidance last July. And there's a number of documents on our website that talks about the changes in TIC and how the agencies can use the new architectures. And so with the reset that I mentioned, OMB, GSA, ourselves, and a number of other stakeholders, there's 3 themes when you look at the new guidance. It's the new security architectures. It's not just one security architecture like it was with TIC 1, TIC 2. There's a number of architectures that are now applicable for agencies to consider. Number 2, the flexibility that agencies now have. Considering these different architectures, flexibility in determining how to secure those environments, what different types of policy enforcement points or policies to place in front of those environments. And third, the visibility requirements. Visibility, the situational awareness mission, both to CISA and the agencies themselves, getting the monitoring in place, understanding what's really going on with these new architectures. So with TIC 1, TIC 2, and moving away from that legacy, what we call the castle and moat strategy, for TIC 3, recognizing the need for new strategies, new architectures, and new visibility is really the big difference in the initiative.
Great, thank you for that. And Alan, maybe some of the lessons, you're in a unique position where you work for a big agency, you're representing the small agency, CISO council. What are some of the lessons that you learned in the big agency that you took over to try to help folks dealing with these security threats?
Well, any of the lessons learned that that state has available, I try and make sure that we actually meet with the smalls and brief them if we can. They've done it a number of times with various different technologies and services. Obviously, I'm not here on behalf of the State Department, but you know, I am focusing on the smalls, and to just make sure to highlight one thing Ralph was saying earlier. The smalls definitely do have a fundamental challenge. It's not only the internal strifes that typically occur at most agencies, but also they run into a lot of the challenges with resourcing. Because if you look at some of the challenges that are existing, I mean, some of the agencies that are even smaller than Ralph's will end up maybe having one or two resources to do IT for security in any way, shape, or form. And their budgets are very small. And if you are looking at the whole cyber program these days, I mean, to be frank, it's very challenging to be a CISO these days because the burden is really high on you. And especially since the beginning of the end of last year, I mean, the uptick has been just massive because of the different attacks and everything else. So, you know, and a lot of these smalls, I think, the challenge you'll run into is they have to rob Peter to pay Paul to essentially fix different problems, and they may not be able to do all of the things they need to do for cyber because they just don't have either the resources or the expertise to do it.
So,
Right.
so if I could just project here a minute as
Sure,
well. So you know, as a small agency or even some of the micro agencies, those of us in that role, we have to satisfy the same requirements that a large agency like the Department of State or anyone else, right?
Right.
I get audited all the time. I'm spending a significant amount of time of audits, and then I have to meet the compliance aspects, right? Let alone all the operational cybersecurity and training and awareness, all the things that are associated with, you know, a good cyber program. So
Yeah,
that's
good.
just another thing in addition to all of, you know, obviously the recent hacks that have hit us.
Great point. Let's we want to go to maybe we'll start off with a poll pretty quick and we can get some commentary and then I'll ask some questions. Alyssa, if you can put the first poll question up. On a scale of 1 to 5, how confident is your agency's ability to prevent threats that target all attack vectors? All right. We can answer that in a few seconds. Let's see how quick on the triggers everybody is. I think we may have had enough time. Alyssa, do you want to kind of show what we got? That's actually not too bad. Any comments on that? Was anybody surprised?
Well, I mean, put it this way, as I mentioned in my earlier intro, I think the smalls are very innovative. They're able to kind of find ways around and be able to mitigate a lot of the solutions. But they have to be very innovative. And again, what they will end up doing sometimes is robbing Peter to pay Paul sometimes. So that's the key thing. That is, I think, if there's anything that these breaches as of late have shown us, I think a lot of the plans the smalls had for modernization and everything else are really on hold now because of all those upticks they had to deal with.
Interesting. That actually kind of goes into my first question. How can small agencies work to accelerate detection and prevention through the use of emerging technologies? Did we see some of that where using the kind of the latest and greatest, or maybe I'll start off with you, Sean, because you kind of work with lots of different agencies. What have you seen?
Do you mean in general, just the SolarWinds, or just in general with IT modernization?
I think generally IT modernization, probably, right?
Yeah. So I think one thing we're witnessing, and this to be fair is also from just watching, commercial enterprises itself and the greater is there's been three themes that have been coming out lately. First is the interest in location agnostic security, right? We have remote users at home, we have still have on-prem. You're seeing the great push toward different types of remote platforms. Of course, the cloud is another one, and all the sensors that are now on the networks that feed data back. And I think there's an interest for policy parity, if you will, between those different platforms. So that's the first one. On the second one, I think just generally interesting is the level of attention that cybersecurity is gaining more at the C-suite or the executive level. Certainly just as much as soon as what we've talked about, with SolarWinds itself and the interest from the board level. More recently, what we're just seeing happen with Colonial Pipeline, and just the interest from the Wall Street Journal and different business magazines is definitely the risk involved is getting recognized higher up the chain of command. I think it would have been a few years ago. And the third thing, Tom, just to sort of go back to your question itself, is the security technology itself, how it's evolving. Talking with Alan for a while, just how they're trying to collapse a lot of these different platforms they have out there to get more of a general security solution itself. Also, the interest and evolution in like the MITRE attack framework or Lockheed kill chain that's presenting a tabula rosa for everyone to be able to talk together in a universal language. So, a couple of different things.
Well, yep. Thank you, Alan. You want to just kind of expound on that a little bit?
No, everything Sean said, I think I agree with. The one thing that is extremely interesting as well is a lot of the smalls, sometimes some of the smalls, the CISO, it does not report directly to the agency head. So there is sometimes that dichotomy of just the miscommunication that exists. But that's not only kind of happening at the small level. I think that happens at the large agencies too. There are some larger agencies that I think have that same kind of misplacement of the CISO, for example. And to Sean's point, it is very key that the CISO now is starting to get to be a more and more important role. The other part that I think is very unique to the smalls. Not all the smalls have the ability to have full clearances, which means that even though the DHS does a great job of providing very great threat intel, they may not be able to get it to the small and micro agency community because the agencies aren't cleared for it. And sometimes that makes it more difficult because then the agency, it's going to be harder for a security layman to go to their agency leadership and articulate what the real threat is. And that
right.
sometimes makes it even more of a challenge. So
what is the answer to that? Declassify or lower the classification level of things that everybody knows about anyway? Or
I don't think that's gonna work. The reality is, I think to CISA's credit, they are doing the best job they can, but some of these things, because of the threat levels they're at, they can't go declassify the info. I mean, doing stuff like CDM and some of the CDM programs will allow them to push some of the threat monitoring out to those sensors without having to release that information publicly. But even still, doing that is one thing. Being able to talk to leadership about the challenges that are really existing is a different one.
yeah, somebody had a comment: sanitize when possible, maybe not fully declassify.
Yeah, I think this. Yeah, no, I'll double down on that part of it. One of the things in the old tick 1 and tick 2 was really this momentum back then to have more, as what Alan was talking about, have more cleared people at the agencies. But of course, then there's all the challenges around having those secure rooms in place and just the telecommunications in place. And really, that was a large challenge for some of the larger agencies, and where we are now, the smalls. It's certainly a greater challenge at the smalls. And so I think that movement is less trying to push classified information out to the agencies. There's still a number of ways it can happen. There's now read-ins that can happen for a couple of days. The Einstein 3 program has classified indicators for it that all the agencies are using. But really, the momentum is to get more information out in the declassified realm in some way, like I say, in some sanitized version of it, for greater awareness, not only for the agencies, but the public as well.
Great, great. And Ralph, I don't think I asked you about this topic.
So yeah, actually, I want to take advantage of what Sean indicated a few minutes ago. But as a result of SolarWinds, I use that to my advantage. I have to go to my executive committee, to my boss, and say, look, this is what happens. I'm able to leverage that and say, instead of waiting another year to implement a project that I had in my queue, I got money to do it this year. So those in the leadership roles that can't take advantage should use that forward. There's obviously a lot of publicity around the cyber attacks, even obviously this week, right, with the Colonial Pipeline issues. So that's something. And the other thing that Sean mentioned before was I'm always looking for innovation and a way to consolidate. We tend to have a lot of different tools, and sometimes they don't speak to each other, or you have to go to one, the analyst has to go from one console to another to understand what's going on. But there's been a lot of consolidation starting years ago where these capabilities are coming together. Just look like, for example, intrusion prevention system used to have a separate firewall and a separate intrusion prevention system, but that kind of consolidated. We're seeing that now on the endpoint side. So we should be looking at where we should leverage technology to support us. But even with technology, you still need resources to manage and to implement those solutions. So.
Yeah, Ralph, I've been doing a lot of these over the last year or so. I've definitely seen the consolidation of tools. It's just you can only be experts at so many, and putting these tools and having them all work together is definitely an issue. And I think some of the tools we found out are bought and never implemented. So I think people are looking at that. So I think you're right about that. Let's go to the second poll question, Alyssa, if you don't mind. All right. In your opinion, how far along is the agency in accelerating detection and prevention through the use of emerging technologies? So we're going to hear from everybody else on this topic. I'm just going to see what people have to say. Okay, we'll give it another minute, and then I think we close the book on emerging technologies. Let's see what we have. All right. So, yeah. So, looks like everybody's kind of getting on board, huh? Did that surprise you, Ralph? Or
Surprise me.
yeah. Sometimes these polls are intuitive. Go ahead, Alan.
It doesn't surprise me either. Like I said, the smalls are a pretty scrappy group, and I think they know how to find innovative ways of doing things. So it really doesn't surprise me.
I think one thing also, we've worked with a number of agencies on pilots and the way they're starting to use the hyperscalers. And just what was interesting to me was with some of the cloud providers was the way they offered telemetry called Cloud 1.0 was really more to monitor your environments more, because the cloud providers themselves had to monitor the environments to understand what the customers were doing. But you're really starting to see momentum from the cloud providers to embed more security and more visibility in their products natively. And so as that poll questions will show, I think that'll number go up over time as people become more familiar with these advanced solutions that are natively embedded in these new cloud providers.
Yeah, and I would also argue that because of the last 15 months of telework, I would argue that the mobility is forcing a massive acceleration of that. I mean, there's agencies that are now really looking at doing true VDI rather than pushing out laptops or VPNs, because it just makes more sense. And so I would argue that I think this whole pandemic, there is a silver lining, which is that I think a lot of these agencies are going to get modernized pretty quickly, and they all are taking advantage of it. So to do that.
Great. While we're on that subject, since pandemic, what has changed for the small agencies? Maybe note some of the changes you've seen on the security. Maybe starting off with you, Sean. Is there obviously we're going to more remote work. What kind of interesting things have you seen across these 150 agencies or so? Just some anecdotes that you've noticed.
Sure. Yeah. So that's a great question. When, from my perspective, there was always that, the architecture I talked about before, tick one, tick two, and the MTIPS providers, those classic ISPs had a large role in that. But with tick three, the agencies have a greater choice of architectures to use, and you're starting to see some of those agencies begin to use CASB solutions, right? Cloud Access Security Broker solutions, or some type of, going back to what Alan's talking about, some type of maybe virtual desktop offered by the cloud providers themselves. And so there's that momentum toward using having the traffic go directly from the end user to the cloud at a more efficient rate than having the hair bonus we've talked about before, going through the traditional tick access points. And then that visibility is now able for the agencies to be able to use in new ways. So I think there's a couple of things that are happening just intuitively by the shift of the telework momentum, if you will, to help accelerate agencies along. I think Alan hit it spot on the head. I read somewhere that modernization efforts ramped up by 7 years over the last year, just from the acceleration of the modernization efforts.
7
Yeah.
years over the last year. That's a quotable. Okay.
Yeah, and I would also add that it's actually forced the agencies, small and large, any of them that have had legacy applications that people have been very much hesitant about modernizing. It's really driven those applications to be modernized. That's, I think, if I've seen anything, that's been the most surprising trend that I've been seeing.
Yeah, because it's hard to convert those legacy applications and make them for the remote user. I mean, it's just really, I'm sure it was really, really hard. How about you, Ralph? Inside of your own agency, what kind of changes did you guys have to make?
Actually, to be honest, we didn't have to make any changes. We have a very mobile workforce. Everyone had a laptop as soon as they start. They're issued a laptop. They could access Citrix or another mechanism to get into the network. We have an always-on VPN. So it makes life pretty easy. Just, turn on your workstation. And from a cybersecurity perspective, we still have the visibility because we have that always-on VPN on. So when a user accesses the internet, they're coming into our network, so we have the visibility. So we didn't really have to change anything from a cybersecurity perspective. There were some challenges with getting additional equipment out to people, but that wasn't my problem, which was that. So we were pretty fortunate. We also have a couple of different mechanisms through multi-factor authentication to get into the network. So it was.
I had a nickel for every time I heard that one over the last year.
Or every time you hear, "Oh, my VPN's down." That's the other one.
Oh, knock on wood, we didn't have any of those issues.
You're lucky. I can't tell you how many smalls I've talked to, and they're like, "Yeah, Alan, sorry, I couldn't join because my VPN's down." So
that's.
Yeah, well, Tom, one story I don't know gets coverage enough, and of course Maria wrote when she was at SBA and the time there, right? When we started working with Maria's team, and I think 2017 on their tech pilot and where their data center was, she tells a story how there was a storm or something, or a pipe broke in their data centers, and she at that time told the IT team we were moving to the cloud, and that vision, and then just what happened after they started to move everything to the cloud, and then when the pandemic happened, of course, SBA as an agency was right there at the center of all this money being, need to get out to all the different businesses. I just can't imagine where SBA would have been if they were still in that data center, if that pipe had burst, right? And just that vision that her team had to be able to take that on, I think was great.
We did I know there is technically a CFO Act agency, but the Small Business Administration is similar to many of the agencies in the group. I was lucky enough to be invited pre-pandemic to Sanjay Gupta's and guys. They kind of like showed how they consolidated all their tools and how they were working on one pane of glass, and it's pretty impressive, and how they're constantly improving their enterprise. It's definitely a model. When we get past pandemic, I hope they start those tours, after the PPP has been done and all the things that they're working on. That was really a good model, I think, reducing the tools, just taking inventory of everything you have. And then, it's really helped them when we're doing the Paycheck Protection Program. They got it was actually pretty big money, not as much money as Ralph makes, but 700 billion dollars out to, or $700 billion out to folks. That's kind of big bucks. So, and it saved a lot of businesses. So similar type stories. Let's go to the last poll question just to make sure this gets in, because it's kind of like continuing on this vein while we're talking about cloud. What is the biggest challenge on the path to more effectively secure environment? So we don't have it like we had in my poli-sci classes, A and B and AC, and but it should be kind of interesting. Let's see what we have here.
I know where my money is on this one, but we'll see if that's the answer.
No, yeah, don't spike the results there, Sean. All right, what do we got, Alyssa? I like it. A little bit across the board. Interesting. Anything stick out, Sean? Did you?
No, yeah, I came in there tied for first. The human aspect of it is really where I was concerned. As we move to the cloud, we hear across the board, both at the agency level and exactly what Ralph and Al could talk about, just the skill sets that are out there and what's necessary, and then the vendors themselves and just the rate they're coming out with new services. And so just the ability to keep up and have a cloud subject matter expert is pretty rare. And it's a tough gap that we're trying to fill across the board. So I'm glad to see the human aspect challenge is right up there as one of the priorities.
Yeah, Alan, you're nodding your head. Did you want to add anything to that? I think we can go right into workforce, because that was the next question.
So what I was going to say is Sean's 100% spot on. The human aspect is actually the biggest challenge. And it's kind of funny. We may be able to bring on as many contractors as we want, but if we don't have the right kind of federal staff that actually know what they're talking about and can help govern those contractors the right way, it's not going to help us. And I think it's a challenge because sometimes the federal staff do not have because of the rapid changes, we don't have enough federal staff that can rapidly keep up with all of the different things that are occurring. I mean, that's kind of the reality. And I think for as small, it's even more difficult because I think resources at a small will have a harder time getting out to get some of these trainings because they're firemen. They're being a fireman all the time.
I think to comment on that, ATARC was kind of born out of the GSA conference scandal, a long story that we won't get into. And for those people that weren't around back then, it basically made it so it's really hard to go outside of especially in the beginning, to go to training, to go to conferences, and to learn. It's made it really, really, really tough. And I don't know if we snap back completely. And now we've had pandemic, right? So, I just know what the Global 1000 does. They train their project managers. They give them every training in the book. They don't just give them, they give them Harvard. They give them these really good training, because you want your government people to really be well-rounded. They should be going to the Gartner conference. They should be learning and learning and learning to help manage these contractors better, right? That are actually doing the work. So I fully support that. Ralph, how about in your agency? It's hard enough to compete with the private sector. You're smaller. How is it for a small agency to even compete against like CISA, for instance, right?
So
how challenging is it for you guys?
Yeah, I want to tease out one point that I think it's important to raise again, is the human aspects, but from a different perspective, not from an IT or cybersecurity staff perspective, but from the end user, right? We tend to blow over the training and awareness activities. We have increased our phishing tests over the last year because of what's happening in the real world, right? There's been a significant increase in phishing tests and social engineering techniques. So we're trying to constantly educate our users, right? I think that's something that, some people or some organizations tend to forget. Training and awareness tends to be a very cost-effective way to secure an environment. Yeah, we love, in IT, we always like to play with toys and implement new technology, but really the workforce, the end user, people that we support on a day-to-day business perspective, they need to be trained and aware of what's going on and out there. So that's wanted to throw that out there as a discussion topic, because you really kind of get to the human aspect, but from a different perspective. So.
Right, right. Sean, you want to add anything about workforce training?
No, I think, we haven't mentioned the magic word zero trust. But there's certainly, with the interest and momentum towards zero trust, and just the ability of everyone, as Ralph was saying, up and down, just not on the IT side, but the end user themselves, the executive level, everyone understanding what zero trust means, right? And how it is different than the old models we've had. And it really means, and this goes back to John Kindervag, who coined all the zero trust terms, was taking that notion of the human element of trust outside digital systems and being able to apply mechanisms themselves to be able to establish confidence in the system versus what we've had before, which is this implicit level of trust. And it's a hard, in one way, I think it's interesting. We've heard from some of the executive levels, they are able to understand that easier, grasp the implications of that, versus the technical teams, which may have more legacy knowledge, or trying to marry the zero trust philosophy with some of their architectures they have out there. So it's an interesting area that I think we'll be seeing how the interest of zero trust moves throughout the entire organization.
I think Sean has my script, because like every time I'm about to ask a question, he like kind of jumps it there. He's good. That's pretty good. A little bit of a commercial. We have really good government leadership with SBA and State Department for our zero trust working group. I think we've got maybe 100 people in it, and they're just kind of just getting started. That seems to be an answer for a lot of these problems. Ralph, how are you guys headed down that journey with zero trust, and how do you think it'll impact your agency?
That's a good question. I've been toying with that idea for some time now. Attended some presentations, trying to learn more about it. But again, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier on about these competing requirements, just getting the resources and the people to implement it. It's not just a cybersecurity issue. I have to get a bunch of folks involved. So it's definitely on the radar. I need to work on that next year.
Yeah, I think you're pretty much where everybody else. So I've been doing a lot of zero trust ones too. I think it's a difficult problem because it involves your applications, it involves your network. It's an all-encompassing thing for your whole enterprise. That's not easy, and so I think we're working toward that. I don't think we have all the answers or anything even close right now. Alan, how is this a topic du jour in the group? What do you see tangentially? Where are we at that stage, and where do you think we'll be maybe in a year from now? You're on mute, Alan. No problem.
I think that is the common term that occurs to me every day. At least once a day, you're on mute, Alan. Anyway,
I thought it was gonna be about zero trust, but
I know,
yeah.
It's always, I swear to God, if there's anything that people say to me, Alan, we must say you're on mute about 10 times a day. I'm like, okay, thanks. All right, so all seriousness. So zero trust is one of those things that the smalls have talked about here and there, but I think for the smalls, the largest challenge is it's not a one size fits all type of an answer. And there are a lot of different vendors that can do the work. I think after the working group comes up with some good models and definitions, the smalls will be able to try and implement some of these. But again, I think for them, just like Ralph said, it's one of the priorities, and there's a lot of competing priorities. I mean, if we keep getting these cyber incidents, that kind of stuff gets pushed further and further back in the queue to actually implement. So, that's kind of, I think, where it is right now.
Great. Well, I'll remind them, I can keep asking questions, and they're giving some great answers, but please, if you have any questions for this group, please ask away. Otherwise, I'll just keep going here. Stepping back a little bit, what are some of the best practices that organization can take to defend federal IT environments? Let's just say you're a CISO, you just got into the job. What are some of the things that you're doing? And I'm going to start off with you, Ralph. Where are some of the best practices you kind of picked up that you're implementing and work for you?
I always like to go back to basics, Tom, and really focus on good cyber hygiene, right? Having a good vulnerability management program, your management practices, conducting scans, configuration scans. Those are kind of basic things that people, was at least what I read and what I see. If you take care of the basic principles, you could probably resolve a good 80% of the challenges that you face, right? Obviously, deploying multi-factor authentication. I'm still, dumbfounded. I hear people or organizations have not implemented some form of multi-factor authentication, right? And again, I'm going to go back to the training and awareness piece. Again, that's really cost effective. So I'd like to talk about going back to the basics, because again, we tend to lose sight of some of those things. So we've been practicing, and we patch, and there's a 0 day. We kind of reduce that time to test and deploy our patches when we need to, right? Based on criticality of the vulnerability and the risks associated with them. So I always like to go back, like I said, to the basic premise: good cyber hygiene, right? Which includes the end user.
I just think back to football, blocking, tackling. That's really what it is, right? It's not this exotic stuff initially. It's like getting all the basics and doing that well. Sean, what have you seen in your experiences?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. When you're asking about the basic cyber hygiene, I always think of Steve Hernandez, right, the CISO from education. He's always saying start with what's already in your management plane. Probably have plenty of tools in there and take advantage of those versus having to gain a new gadget, right, or new tool to do it. Look at what you could reuse in new ways. And that includes on the cloud side, right? That shared service model that cloud providers have. There's ways to leverage it through the FedRAMP program and understanding where the agency has their responsibilities and their risk compared to what the cloud service provider has. I think that's still something, an evolving discussion we're having with the cloud providers writ large. Then, we've talked a little bit about zero trust. It's going to take a number of years for us to move toward a zero trust architecture. It's not going to be something that's going to just be done by a product or over a few short months. It's going to take years. I think Google, when they're very vocal about moving to beyond core, their zero trust model, it took Google, the most prominent software company in the world, 7 years to move towards zero trust. So when you're talking to some of these agencies, and of course the smalls themselves, and some of the largest with their legacy systems, it's going to take us a significant amount of time to even move toward that same level of capabilities where someone like Google already has. So I think, like I said, Ralph hit it on the head though with the cyber hygienes first and foremost.
Great. Alan, you want to close this up on that topic?
Believe it or not, I really don't have much to add. I mean, I think everything that Ralph and Sean said is 100% spot on. Going back to basics sometimes is the most important thing you need to do. Walking into an agency as a CISO, you really need to look at what's there and kind of go through the basics to help you kind of figure out the path forward. It's the only way you can do it. The only other thing I would kind of add is one thing I've learned from the small agency community more than anything else is the community is really good, so that I would say that if you are a CISO going into any small agency, you can lean on the community pretty hard. The community is extremely open to sharing and collaborating and helping each other. I think if there's any other thing that can help a CISO going into an organization, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that helps sometimes.
Great. Well, let's one more question. I just want to know, hey, if we do the small agencies big impact, we've renamed the conference, but if we do this next year, Ralph, what are some of the things? Where do you hope to see small agencies and your enterprise, and specifically, where do you think we'll be in a year? What will be different?
Oh, that's a tough question. I'm not great with the crystal ball, but we definitely need to be a little bit more proactive. Some of this may be outside of our area of influence, if you would. Since December, right? We've had SolarWinds, we've had Microsoft Exchange, and more recently the Colonial Pipeline, right? I think we're going to be looking and leaning more heavily on DHS and other folks to come down with either some more policy support or other types of support. It's a fight that we all have to share. We're all doing the same type of, like you talked about, the blocking, basic things that a football team has to do, right? We're doing kind of the same things. So I would be looking to, DHS and other folks, right? Our legislators to help to make it a little bit easier for us to do our work, right? So I don't have a good crystal ball as far as technology and where we're going, but I would hopefully not going to, let's face it, we all in this business understand that cyber events, whether there's money involved or intellectual property, people are going to try and reach and capture that information. So we have to be on guard. And what Alan indicated before, those of us in the federal sector that share that information, we're all trying to solve the same type of problems, and it's a good chance that someone out there already solved that problem. So, leverage where you can and take advantage of those folks.
Well, Ralph, you made me think of all the things that have happened in the last year. We don't know what's going to happen in the next year. I think it's got to be flexibility, and for what's going to come your way. Not an easy job. Great. So how about you, Sean?
Sure. Yeah, I'll get on my soapbox and say just the interest and momentum towards zero trust. I think both from OMB and the White House leadership level, and then also from the agencies themselves, and just there's like Alan was talking about before. I think the interest has been with zero trust for the last couple of years, and with the shift toward remote users now, and really this decentralized workforce and decentralized architecture, the understanding that we could possibly take advantage of a zero trust architecture. That NIST special pub 80207 and zero trust architectures, there's 7 tenets in there toward moving towards zero trust. And some of those tenets are really tenets that we've had for a long time. We're just able to take advantage of them now with these new solutions from the cloud providers and CASBs and such in ways that we couldn't 10 years ago. Access determined by policy. That should have always been a central tenet of cybersecurity. Access, but dynamically allowed, access being ephemeral. I think these are just, again, we're able to scale security in ways now they weren't able to 5-10 years ago. So that move towards zero trust is where I'm excited to watch what happens.
Yeah, I just see, it reminds me with cloud, are we going to do cloud? We might do cloud. Then it just was inevitability. And I think that's where zero trust is for sure. And Alan, you don't worry about the mute thing. I think when I first started this, I was on mute for like 3 minutes. That's not really good for doing a webinar. And I was like wondering why nobody was answering any questions. So
yeah, so believe it or not, if there's anything I would say as a crystal ball, I would hope that there's going to be a really big push to hopefully have a true shared services model that a lot of the smalls can jump in on. Because I think one of the things that has been an open discussion for, oh my God, almost as long as I've been on the council, is that there has to be some kind of, if there are shared services that the smalls can leverage to kind of offset the resource load or the impact that they have, I think that would be of value. And I think, if this pandemic has shown anything, the ability that people can shift and do that kind of stuff, I think is very, very evident. And I think if we have a shared services model, it'll help kind of streamline a lot of security issues, even for the DHS folks. I would say. The other thing is, I think you'll see a big shift to being what I would call device agnostic. So, it's not going to matter if you have a Windows machine, a Mac, a Chromebook, or a Linux box, or anything. You'll be able to access a lot of the agency infrastructures through some kind of an agnostic model. Because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of agencies, you're seeing the move to VDI, this whole mobility push is very big. A lot of agencies are investing very heavily in the whole UAM, Unified Access Management type of model. So I think that would be the other big one. And the last one, and this is something that it's really not about technology, but I think you'll see a lot of agencies won't really need office space anymore. I think the reality is I think there's some agencies I've already indicated they're never going back to their buildings. They're actually giving up their space because they've already moved everything to the cloud that they can, so they don't need the physical office space anymore. And the pandemic has shown that they can work. So their logic is, why even go back? So I think that by this time next year, I think we're going to see a lot of those kind of shifts.
Yeah, I think you're right. I just saw Jason Miller, who's a great reporter for Fed News Network. You know, he was covering about green government, and I think 60% of all GSA leases, GSA manages a lot of the leases in the civilian government. 60% are coming up by 2023. So people are going to be making some business decisions, and I think there's going to be a lot of study around. Some people like being in the office, some people don't. Some people are better for it. So I think there's going to be a lot of science, and we have a workforce management subgroup, working group that I think is going to come up with some really cool stuff. So it's very interesting. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you, Alan, for all your work. Ralph, thank you for joining us, and of course, you, Sean. Frequent guest. You're like in Saturday Night Live. You're kind of up there in the out of appearances. I don't know who's number one. We might have to add that up sometime, but you're right. You're right in the discussion. Thank you all. It was a good discussion. Enjoyed it, and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll go on to right into the next panel. If we can get Christine and Howard. And I see Mr. Duffy there. Great. I think we're coming along. Do we have Christine? There we go.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing, Tom. That was useful.
Yes, I tried to provide information. If you're doing all these webinars, you hear so much stuff, you might as well take some of that knowledge you hear somewhere else and bring it on. Good to see you all. So what we're going to do is some real quick intros. And I just started a new thing that I like doing is I want to hear what's the best thing that happened to you today. So Christine, welcome. Let me get your title here. You are at the Office of Government-Wide Policy, OGP, General Services Administration. And are you working from home today?
I am.
Great. And where is home? Are you in the city?
I'm in the city. I'm in a one-bedroom condo with my husband and my dog, just north of Chinatown.
Great, great. And what is the best thing that happened to you today? That you don't put you're on this webinar. That's probably, might be. I know that's probably number one, but what else?
A few hours before this webinar, we had a great meeting with OSTP on AI, and I think there's a lot of attention at the executive level on AI and having a more coordinated government-wide effort to kind of coordinate everything that's happening across the government, and that's pretty exciting.
Wow, that's pretty good. I think one of the best events that I had was sponsored by OSTP. I don't know if you gentlemen were there. It was an AI event we did at the White House, and it was the group of people there were fascinating. And of course, I was sitting next to Bob DeLuca that used to work at GSA, and that was one of the best events I went to. So OSTP is on this. Good. We'll have to talk about that on another webinar. Anyway, moving on. Howard, how are you doing there, Howard?
Great, Tom. I'm doing great. Thank you. I'm joining you from Los Angeles today, and
oh wow,
it's my sort of first post vaccination travel to visit my mother, who's a little bit older, and I'm taking this call from there.
Great. I assume the best thing to happen to you today, something around that, maybe.
Yeah. Well, in addition to being out here, actually. You have to take the little victories. And so I replaced a light bulb today that was just in a very complex space that even though it was a light bulb, it just was a lot of little planning to be able to reach it, get the fixture down, get a new light bulb in, get the whole thing back together again. So I'm pleased as punch that I'm off with a little win to start the day.
That's funny. I've got one at my place. Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to get it. It's like one of these odd places. I'm going to kill myself. I got to figure out a way to get to it. So definitely. Well, great to have you from LA. And last but not least, we have Bobby Duffy. And Bobby, I've got your title right here, Chief Information Officer, U.S. Merit Systems Protection Board. How are you doing today, Mr. Duffy?
Doing great, Tom. No stranger to egg talk. Looking forward to this afternoon's discussion.
Yeah. I don't know. We've gone back a ways. I know you guys had a couple of roles over time, but we worked, I think we're back when you were in the U.S. Postal Service.
Yeah.
OIG. That was
OIG
a while
over
ago.
there. And then I moved to energy and then DHS OIG, where I was the CIO, and I ran in headquarters, the Enterprise Mobility Project, which was a lot of fun, Tom. Remember we had
Yeah.
a lot of discussions and conversations on that. So
Fun
now
stuff.
I'm
So
back. I'm
go ahead.
doing almost a little IG work. We're protecting Whistleblower Protection Act and stuff.
great,
All we're
great.
hearing
Well,
right now is federal employees' complaints and issues and appeals and all that stuff. But I'm having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Good to see everybody.
Good to see you. And what was the best thing to happen to you today?
Best thing to happen to me today. Well, it was simple. The weather came good. I had 2 meetings canceled, so I was able to get some exercise in when I wasn't even planning to this morning. So I got excited about that. That's will free up some time this afternoon.
Great, great. Well, we're going to dive into it. We want to talk today about adoption and standardization of collaboration tools. And no better place to start, probably we're going to go with Christine Lamb, who works at the aforementioned Office of Government-Wide Policy at GSA. And I can't wait to hear from you, Christine.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. GSA has been at the forefront driving towards a sustainable, secure, and standardized collaboration system. Most of this agency was teleworking even before the pandemic, so we were really able to expand that. And I think we all know that collaboration tools has many benefits. It can find efficiencies, and it can help build a team in a virtual environment. So at the request of the CIO Council, the Office of Government-Wide Policy's Emerging Tech Division that I'm a part of, in coordination with OMB, is conducting a research project on several collaboration areas. We've identified challenges agencies face when they're trying to use collaboration tools for interagency projects. And we are proposing or drafting some recommendations that would allow agencies to leverage the technology they have today to collaborate outside of their agency boundaries.
Great, great. And how about you, Howard? I think I forgot your title too. Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer of the Export-Import Bank and a ATARC Pro. I think you were like one of our last in-person events, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah. Our focus right now is sort of taking it to the next level. To me, the amazing thing about the collaboration tools is, frankly, to me, it's bigger than collaboration. We rely on the collaboration tools as really the fabric that holds the organization together in a sort of a distributed teleworked mode. So in addition to the traditional things that we think of with collaboration, it also is now, and where Teams user integrated with email, telephony, and the like. So, it's interesting nowadays when we say, I'm going to make a call. We're seeing that at this point, 95% of our call traffic is actually through the Teams platform, and actually only 5% is going over traditional telephony. So, like I said, in addition to collaboration, I look at it as this broader fabric to hold a distributed organization together. The other thing that I would highlight that we're really focusing on now is the cultural elements to really take advantage of the technology. We have all this capability at our fingertips, and we feel that if we kind of look at where we're using versus the frontier, if we focus on culture, which is a little bit more than training and best practices, but it's that outreach and really driving that penetration, we can see significantly enhanced personal productivity and just personal satisfaction with the office environment. That more and more of the office environment is the environment that we're speaking into right now.
Great, great. Yeah, interesting. 5% of your telecommunications through typical, telephony as we think about it. And you guys have just gone all in on Teams as a collaboration tool. It's very interesting. Bobby, how about you? How's your enterprise collaborating? And when did you get there again? You got there like during
July of
right?
July of 2020. So, they adopted on a standard tool before I came on board, and I thought it was a very wise decision and the investment. Our big thing, and Howard hit it, was the cultural elements. We have a lot of people, a lot of labor attorneys been there at the agency for a long time. So we know ease of use, simple configuration, a easy procurement strategy to get a tool that was easy to train. Our number one goal is a trained workforce. And we thought Zoom for Government gave us that at the time. We were able to leverage that. So I think that was certainly at the time, and we see it right now, where we're using, Zoom for audio. Right now, we're testing that to do a real-time hearing, right? For some of the administrative judges, we're able to look at some more capabilities too. It brings up some challenges though right now. As we add more features, now we need to look at the privacy, the system of records with chats and more of that. We're getting a lot more of that. So we're looking at that. How do we, the lesson learned from it, what worked well, and now how do we mature it and kind of go forward? Now to Howard's point, it's the hub, right? Now what's the teams? How does this work? So we're looking at telephony. What's that new VoIP solution? We do a lot of internal video conferencing at 9 regional offices and here in headquarters in Washington. We need to revisit that, right? And that's a big thing. We need to, reshape and adapt our network. We're going to segment voice and data on a separate network. Are we just going to leverage the internet and some of the security tools right here for secure connection to cloud providers and what have you? But that has to be part of the big discussion on collaboration on going forward. So that's how we've been working on it right now. But it's been, as far as the simple configuration, the acquisition strategy, and certainly a trained workforce, it worked well for the agency.
Great, great. Something you both touched on. It's kind of near and dear to my heart. I was on FTS 2000 when I started my career, FTS 2001, and it was just like for like every time. I got a voice network, I got a data network. Now it's different. I think we're starting to see people are adopting new approaches to things. Let's do a poll question. We had a great interactive audience on the first panel, and I want to continue that. Can we show that poll? In your opinion, what is the highest priority collaboration tools, practices in need of standardization across government? So take a second to maybe come up with the highest priority, right? And let's see what we come back with. We'll give it just a few seconds for everybody to take their time, but we'll go ahead and I think we're okay. Alyssa. Interesting. I think we saw calendar scheduling and email and instant messaging a little bit ago, it looks like to me. Any surprises there? Okay. Yeah, it didn't look like, sometimes the polls state the obvious, sometimes they lead us in different directions. So anyway, my first question to you all is, having a full year of pandemic-induced telework experience, which collaboration practices or methods have emerged as most vital to your workforce? So maybe a little more detail on that. And what have you seen, Christine, across government and maybe internally to the GSA? I know you guys have always been remote. What changed with GSA? And then what you've seen across federal government?
I just started at GSA during the pandemic as well. So it was quite the shift for me. But I think, the use of Hangouts or just video conferences for instant meetings to kind of replaces, the office drop by or the water cooler talk or something like that has been really new and I think great and useful. And I think across government, just there has been you wouldn't think about it, but there has been so much trouble finding suitable video conferencing tools. There was a lot of questions about certain tools. The Hill wanted to use a certain tool, so everyone had to rush out and get that one in order to brief the Hill. And then, and we just found, and then some agencies have a lot of tools now, and they're trying to kind of slim down and just pick, 3 or 4. They don't want to maintain like 6 video conference tools for everyone they want to work with.
Yeah, That's tough. One thing, have you noticed, I noticed with GSA, they would be on Google Hangouts, but they used to not show their faces. It seems like his people there really started to embrace see the faces. Seems like that's changed a little bit over there. Just
Yes.
Great.
We're all ready for our video, our faces to be on camera.
great. How about with you, Howard?
Well, I think to me, the most notable is just how comfortable people have become using a variety of tools and seeing sort of the relatively quick consolidation of Zoom, Teams, maybe WebEx, and that people can actually move seamlessly between them. I think sort of the approach on standards has been kind of interesting in the sense that, you rent a car and you don't crash it because it's not, your car. And so just seeing that people can drive multiple tools now with a tremendous facility. I think we've also worked through at least a lot of the initial security concerns that I think initially when we started, there was a lot of discomfort about how you participate in a meeting that perhaps you were not hosting. But I know that working with our CISO and understanding kind of the engineering, I think we also got comfortable with that. So I think the ability to maintain an environment where there's still competition, whether it's Google Hangouts, Team, Zoom, there's room for competition, and yet they can coexist, I think is to me kind of interesting, in just sort of watching how people have adapted through that process. That at least for me right now, I consider it relatively smooth, and I'm actually surprised it shook out as fast as it did.
It really did. I think that in the government, nothing's moved this fast, like in my lifetime, maybe. I mean, with DoD got a memo out in 2 weeks on remote computing. It's like, that hasn't happened since we built the Pentagon. Usually it takes like 18 months to even get the memo out, much less get things in operation. How about for you, Bobby? You got a little unique experience for like being in a couple of agencies.
Yeah, I think Howard hit another word. I think what helped us was, put some governance, some interim policy around it. We adopted Zoom, we didn't allow any recording or any of that. I think we're real clear that we are the host agency and we're going to use Zoom. But I think we need to be clear too on some guidance out there that as a participant, it's okay for Teams or Web to go and stuff to make them feel, it's just not all or one. So that helped. I think we had to have good training on co-editing documents, working in OneDrive or SharePoint, doing that with Zoom with a red line document, and have some protocols on that. I think that helps streamline a lot of the co-editing documents and sharing of that. So that are two things that helped us, the policy side, to get kind of ahead of this. That helped us. And I think right now it's our friends at DHS and GSA with those managed security controls. That was another key criteria when we adopted Zoom, where we're also able to leverage that same criteria for the other platforms too. So it's much easier to say, okay, here's how we're going to do business, especially with the Defense Department and some of our actually larger cabinet agencies right now. We had not pushback in the beginning, but kind of, some negotiations to say how we can leverage, host web conferencing and share documents. But we're able to work through it.
Yeah, can I ask a follow-up question? I'll get with everybody else. One thing that's always fascinated me is, when you go to a meeting in a government agency building and you're all in person, and then everybody else is on the conference call. And I realize now that was just a horrible means of collaboration. If you're on the conference call, it's almost like you're a second-class citizen, and then you're basically kind of not even tuning in. When we get back to a hybrid, I think we're not going back to the way we were, but a hybrid, with these traditional video conferencing systems, what was going to be the transition for the remote people, or how do you think that can play out? I know I'm asking you to put a little crystal ball there.
Yeah, I just, in my opinion, I think we need to work closely with facilities on what's rentable and usable space. That's a good start. I think you need to revisit your VTC, some of your old legacy Polycom or VTC equipment. What's the future state of that? Right, and going, Howard, I think we're all mentioning that. That's where the strategy comes in. right? We all want to adopt to a single collaboration platform. We know how hard that may be, but kind of have a strategy wrapped around that where a lot of things you just brought up on that poll, it contains all that, right? But you have a single platform, of choice could help, right? I think you need to have to revisit that. So I think that's going to be one of the key things when we get back. How are you going to hold an agency all hands meeting? You can do it. We can do it now. We've been doing it virtually, right? And that's been working fine. We're doing it better during the pandemic than we did in the office in some cases. So you're still going to want that capability, but what's that new look and feel going to look like too, from the facility perspective, what we can leverage or reuse, and certainly have some cost containment strategies too, because you're not going to support, a dedicated VTC network, right?
Yeah.
Web conferencing and all the collaboration you're talking about. It's really what's that strategy? What's that platform of choice? What's that training? What's that investment look like?
And you know what? I don't think the VTC ever really took off to its fullest anyway. So it now gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Howard, how are you looking at that issue that we're talking about when we go to the hybrid?
As Bob was alluding, we're looking at how we're operating during the pandemic to actually simplify the number of agreements we have and really begin to club what used to be a lot of different services. So obviously I mentioned telephony, but I mean, if you look at the accretion of features that's happening on Zoom or Teams, every week they're releasing new features. And so previously where we had to have different tools for different types of meetings with different characteristics, we're finding that those features are being added to it and are now clubbable into sort of our main platform. Bob mentioned, it's Zoom for them. For us, it happens to be Team, but I think you're kind of seeing the same trend. And what it means is that a lot of these smaller contracts that I had for these very particular features are now being clubbed. So I've never seen a faster time of sort of feature consolidation, which allows us then to go back through that kind of tech stack in the contracts and say, how quickly can we rationalize the number of contracts and make this simpler and easier. Coming back to the issue of hybrid, I think one of the challenges is simply going to be not from a technology perspective, but from sort of an organization, culture, and values perspective. What does it mean to be on-site? How do we create equity between on-site and off-site? And sort of, what are the expectations? The challenge that I have in puzzling this through is it seems that the common denominator, though, is the tools that we use at telework. So if you're showing up at the office and you have to be agnostic, then what's the advantage of actually walking into a conference room if you've got no commitment that you're going to know who else is actually going to show up in that in that conference room? And so I think that's the part that is, I'm part of a new normal team that's focusing on a lot of non-technology issues around what does it mean return to work. And I think that's the piece that we're really trying to puzzle through. Just like there's customer experience, we have a lot of focus right now on employee experience and trying to ensure that employee experience is great for the person who's showing up in the office and is great for the person who is teleworking, and trying to make that all marry together is something that I'm curious and excited to work through.
Yeah, I don't think we have all the answers. And if I was to start another company, I would have like some kind of virtual codec that would like connect all these different teams and Zoom. And I'm not going to invent that, but it would be a good idea if I'm too busy as it is. Christine, where do you see the government going on this? Because I know GSA has invested in these VTCs, and you try to use the latest tools. Has there been talk about that?
I think one thing we recognize is that collaboration tools are here to stay. It's not just a pandemic, pandemic thing. So what we're looking at is maybe even a long-term situation where there might be a PMO or an office that is continuously surveying new collaboration tools that come onto the market, run tests to see if they do what they say they do, help them with the security settings, get them fed through FedRAMP, and then, you know, kind of think of a contract vehicle that can be offered. So agencies who are looking to procure a collaboration tool, there's one central office they can look to, one government acquisition vehicle that they can go to procure these tools. And, you know, we're all, as a government, on the same team and buying similar things.
Yeah, and I know you guys did some really fabulous work for these agencies when we had that massive transition. You guys did a lot of almost contingency contracting. It was we talked a lot about that in the past. Thank you. I'm going to pull in a special guest to our panel because he asked me such a great question. I can't just read it. Alan Kokorkian, can you come back on this panel? Can you show your face? There you go. Yeah, you're on. We got you in. Welcome back.
No problem. So which of the questions were you talking about?
I was talking about, small agencies and the types of collaboration tools and how they've been moving things forward in answer to the question that you posed me, or your answer to the question that you posed in the chat.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about that, kind of the state of the small agencies, what you've seen.
So it's interesting because, this is one of those questions I think is very important across government. It's not only the smalls, but from the small perspective, we did a large survey. We got a very good response back. I think we got like 40 of the agencies to actually respond, and the results were that WebEx and Teams were the two core tools that everyone was pretty much centralized around. Zoom was a close third. But the funny thing is, though, even though we all had the same tools, we couldn't get them to work with one another. And the main reason is because agencies may end up having the collaboration tool ATO'd at a different threat level. So if you, for example, want to use Teams, some agencies have Teams at FISMA high, others have Teams at FISMA moderate, and trying to connect those two up doesn't work well, and it can't work well. So I think those are the kinds of challenges we're running into, and this has been an ongoing issue for a long time because I mean, look, we've been running the Small Agency Council for almost 9 years, and I think I've used every tool under the sun when it comes down to it, because every vendor has pretty much has done it. We've used it internally, and even at state. I mean, we don't have just one tool. We have a few tools that we use. But I think the thing is, if we really want to be truly collaborative across government, we have to figure out a way to really have one central place or mechanism or tool that we can really collaborate with. Because it should be easy for me to just click a button and go to Howard and say, hey, Howard, let's just chat real fast, or to anybody. I mean, it should not be that complicated.
Thank you, Alan.
but it should not be, because we're put it this way, it's almost like we're living in the 80s still, and that's almost the same kind of technology we're using. We're using mail to do collaboration. It's such an 80s concept, it's ridiculous.
Well, 80s is probably the decade I peaked. So music, culture. I don't know about the technology side. I probably left that behind a little bit.
Yeah.
Bobby, you want to add anything to that?
No, I agree. No, I agree with Alan. It should be that simple. We're still leveraging. We're talking about VTC back in the 80s. We're still leveraging some of those old data.
I know.
Those old platforms. And just now it's fun. Like Howard's, we're all saying, it's going to be exciting getting back, because now we got to revisit the network. I think we've got to really take a look of segmentation. We got to look at data, voice, and video. What's that network going to look like? You got to really look at remote access a different way now. That's the exciting part. And then I think that that'll help us in how we're going to provide, what's that new operating model, right?
Right.
So it's working anywhere, not just working at home. And that's what we're starting, and we're trying to get ahead of that too, to see what's that look like.
Yeah,
We don't have all the answers. We'll get there though.
different
Right,
paradigm.
Alan?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to throw one comment out there that'll make you guys laugh. You know how many small, because I work at state, how many smalls ask me, hey, Alan, I have staff that want to work in like Vietnam for the rest of the pandemic, or Guam, or the best one was, I want to work in one of the folks actually asked to work in Nairobi. Okay. And I'm like, okay, so what do you need from me? Well, can they do it? I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's just up to your agency's policies as to how you do it. But I mean, they're like, I'm like, just make sure, you know, you're tracking them and you're doing what you need to do. You have the security in place. And the funny thing is, it's like, this is the new paradigm where this is the tool. That's it. That's really what we're going. And it's the one thing I would actually comment on is this pandemic has really showed us that unified access is the way to go. I mean, one pane of glass rather than having a desk phone, a computer, a tablet. No, you don't need that stuff anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I abandoned a landline years ago just because I have to like check that voicemail, and you know, even if when you'd forward, it was just a pain in the neck. Let's go to the next poll question because it's dealing with this topic, and we want to hear from our audience and try to learn from this. Let's go, Alyssa. On a scale of 1 to 4, how far along is your agency in standardizing use of collaboration tools? That's a good one. We never asked that before. I think that's going to be a very informative one. Great. What kind of results are we getting there, Alyssa? Not too bad. I think we've come a long way in this pandemic, huh?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think particularly since we're small agencies, they're going to hopefully have a slightly different perspective than large agencies. A lot of us aren't much bigger than a department in a large agency.
Right. Anybody else have any comments on the poll? Good. Well, we'll move on. One thing, somebody asked a question about workforce, and I think that's a big part of collaboration. Are your agencies looking at the type of person you are? Like some people are better, you know, they're individualists. They are good at just hunkering down and doing their AI or their work or ML or whatever they're working on. And then some people like that social aspect. They like being in the thing, you know, in the office to a degree. And then some people like both. They like a little bit of both. I don't know if we're there yet, but are your agencies looking at that? And you know, Christine, you know, you guys have been remote, but how are you guys looking at that for your workforce in the future?
You know, I think GSA is leading one of the councils or the groups to evaluate safe return. And I think that's, you know, employee preferences is one of the things they might be looking at. You know, for us, what we've been told really is that they're just starting to look at the type of work we do, whether we need to be in or not. And I don't know if, you know, and they've asked employees their preference, but to what extent they're, you know, putting it into consideration, I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, because just think, your lease is coming up. How much space do I need? What kind of workplace do I need? It's love to hear your perspectives, Howard. You're right, probably right in the middle of this.
Sure. I think, like I said, you know, part of what we're puzzling through is when people want to be in the office, why do they want to be in the office? And like I said, I think the challenge is a lot of people want to be in the office with the a priori assumption that their colleagues are going to be there and that they're going to be there to interact with them. And so, like I said, to me, the challenging sort of cultural piece that we're trying to focus on is what are these concept of operations that each kind of individual has that they may be using the language for, but is really kind of different. And then how do you kind of expose those unarticulated assumptions, and then ask, are they going to be able to, are you going to be able to make them come true, right? And that's where I think a lot of the interesting sort of magic that we're going to have to kind of work through in the next couple of years is going to come. I mean, you know, like everyone here, I'm at a lot of conferences on the whole topic, and one of the most interesting insights from a conference I was recently at is if it was a complex, you know, sort of emergency to kind of get into pandemic mode. At a CIO conference I was recently asked at, 75% of the participants, and these are CIOs in private and public sector, said it's going to be a more complex and challenging to get back to whatever that new normal is, because it's a much more unbounded, I think, problem than what it is to hunker down at the heart of a pandemic. And so I think we've got to be very active listeners, and we've got to listen on a lot of different channels. You know, listening to leadership, listening to staff, listening to staff depending on what kind of cohort and what kind of issues that they're dealing with. And so I think as we kind of work our way through this, the ability for agencies to listen and just to be intentional and thoughtful and try to work our way back into whatever this new normal is in a place that's great for the employee experience and also our customer experience and our mission.
Yeah, I think it was the Wall Street Journal that had an article that was, as soon as you ask me that I have to go back to the workplace, bye-bye, I'm out of there. I'm not coming back 5 days a week back to the office. You know, I'll get another job. So I think everybody's got to be very sensitive and figure this one out. It's going to take some science, I think. How about you, Bobby? Where do you guys?
We have these casual conversations a lot, these virtual coffee connections with my team. One thing that worked for me in the past, we wanted to improve customer support, help desk personnel, because we're expanding support in the West Coast, so expanding hours. And I asked staff, are you AM or PM people? A lot of people said I like to come in later, work later, or more. And that was a good little technique to engage your staff on. When you come to work, what do you prefer? I'm doing a similar management objective, asking what days you would like. And it's interesting, some of the feedback I'm getting back. Is it 2 days, 3 days, what days? You know, we'll figure that out. And then what type of events? Is it a pre-bidders conference? Is it, vendor management, right? Is it negotiation? What type do they feel that personal contact and that collaboration, they'll get more benefit from it, right? So, or going back, they missed the whiteboard in the design rooms, those coffee sessions, right? So a lot of engineers really want to go back because that's really what they miss and that's what they need. And sometimes they'll feel more efficient. You have a backlog of case files and some of it's paper because it is by law, right? Well, of course, you have to physically go back to see what that work stream looks like. But we're starting to have those conversations now. And I think that's given transparency to the staff and to the agency. So it makes the transition a little more easier of what it will look like. Because it's not going to, the world's been tilted. We're not going to tilt it back, but we need to figure that out. We need to find out, what's types of work or what outcomes that we can work with them on to help to give them that better experience when they do get back to the office.
Yeah, Alan, you work with lots of different agencies. What's the word on the street?
So I would say this. I think everyone's going to have to make a very conscious decision about when they go back. And also, it's not about just going back to this hybrid model or whatever. I think the reality is for any agency, they're going to really have to go back and do a conscious analysis to, well, we don't need this much square footage anymore. Now, if we're going to really telework, we have to move our whole facility or model to this like hoteling concept. And if they do that, that changes the whole dynamic, because that can have all these other OPM impacts as well. And there's a whole bunch of kind of nuances that have to go into this. So I think a lot of the agencies are going to move to that model. And, from our earlier panel, as I mentioned, I think next year the landscape of the government in terms of physical footprint is gonna look very different.
Christine, you want to add anything to that?
Nope.
Yep. Anyway, let's go to our last poll question. And we'll put a bow tie on our collaboration tools and the barriers thereof. Can you put the last one up? In your opinion, what is the biggest barrier in standardizing collaboration tools across federal agencies? This one is not obvious to me. All right. Let's see what we have here. We'll give it a second. Let's see what we have, Alyssa. Yeah, that one wasn't obvious to me. Pretty even across the board. Interesting, standardized data governance. Howard, do you take anything out of that? Anything surprising?
No. Other than I'm puzzling my way through. I mean, obviously there's a whole bunch of data that we work with that we serve up through collaboration tools, and how data governance gets applied to that, I think is something that I don't think our agency has kind of really cracked that
Right.
just yet.
Right. We got a good question. This audience asked better questions than I am, I think. So maybe we got to figure out a way to engage them. They do a great job. What's the effect of productivity, even if it's tangential? And maybe it's not just one answer. Maybe some things were more productive, some things weren't. What have you seen over the last year since we've gone remote? And if it's okay, I'll start off with you, Christine.
I think collaboration tools have helped people be more productive. Just anecdotally, when we're talking about document collaboration, which we can do pretty seamlessly now with Google Docs or even Microsoft Teams. Instead of having to run around and try to find an empty conference room and sit down with a group of people to go over a document, now you can just share your screen or go through a document, everyone at the same time from their own homes. So I think in a way it's increased productivity in ways we hadn't thought of before.
How about you, Bobby? It looks like you're thinking there. Do I need to give you a?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what's been said. I think we're working longer hours. I think we're having more meetings. I think we're having clearer purposes in meetings. Is it informational? Is it decision brief? So I think there's some maturity wrapped around just the overall meeting place. And I think collaboration has brought that. So that's what I've seen in the past year. I do see some degree, but I do think it's not like we're working less. I think we're doing. I think we're definitely working longer, and I don't want to say equal longer. I mean, equals makes that we're working harder, but I'm still seeing that same level of effort. I'm still seeing, I'm still seeing a lot. I'm still seeing a lot of better outcomes in applied research and the research phases of a lot of either market research with a contract. But definitely the partnership with chief data officers, chief privacy officers, records, what's that standardization of data governance in cyber, right? What does that look like? And I think very efficient and very effective doing it in today's environment.
How about you, Howard?
Well, we've been polling our staff, and I think we're somewhere between 60 to 70% of the staff would describe themselves as being actually more productive in this collaborative teleworked environment. I think a lot of that is a little bit DC centric, but I think occurs in other major metro areas of, when does the employee consider that work experience is starting? And frankly, for a lot of folks, it's, from the point that they walk out their front door. And, in the past, that would often include for a lot of staff get to a metro station or some other form of public transportation, work your way into a office, in DC, and then from whatever that terminus, up and through physical security, and then up to your office. So I don't think that we can put aside the advantage of teleworking, particularly if that's sort of like a classic commute experience, and when people kind of start counting that this is my work experience. And I know that if it was a bad day on the metro, sometimes I'd get folks who just needed a half an hour to decompress after getting into the office, after having been sort of shaken and stirred in the commute process.
You missed the commute?
So I think we've taken certain aggravations out of the equation. They're not aggravations for everybody, but like I said, I think in major metro areas that people are really dependent on public transportation, and traffic jams are sort of part of that life or whatnot. We've really improved the employee experience, and so that when people actually get to work now, they're starting from a much better place. I think the one thing I did want to mention, we were talking about one pane of glass, Alan mentioned. We have also tried to pay a lot of attention to making sure that employees at home have the kind of kit that they need, which at least for us is typically somewhere between 2 and 3 panes of glass, integrated, of course. But if you don't have a certain amount of screen real estate, we have a lot of lawyers, and they're reviewing documents and they're writing notes about documents. So we've tried to pay a lot of attention to ensuring that during the pandemic that people have sort of between, the ergonomics of enough screen space and the compute power to drive it has been important. But we've seen a significant, I think, pickup in productivity, a large part because we've taken the aggravation of the commute out of the equation.
Yeah.
Yep, no, great. And how about you, Alan?
I am muted. So anyway, I would say
Inside joke.
Yes, I would say that it is extremely true, but everyone is definitely working a lot more hours. I mean, internally at State, my team has definitely seen it, but I would say that across the board it's like that. The only thing I did wish is there was really an opportunity to have breaks between meetings, because it looks like literally it's one meeting to another, to another, to another, and it's back to back to back to back meetings sometimes, and sometimes lunch doesn't exist. It's just the reality.
Yeah.
And I think that is the case. However, I would also add one other thing. Yeah, there are a lot of folks who this has been very productive, but there are some folks who I think telework actually isn't great for them, because there's some folks who are very good at being inside that office environment and need that kind of structure to really be able to help do their jobs the right way. And they also need other touch points on a regular basis sometimes. And sometimes some of them may need access to systems that you can't get to remotely. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. So yeah, I think after this is going to show us, this activity has really shown us the real areas of where we can benefit and the real areas where we have weaknesses. So that's kind of how I would put it.
Really, really good comments from everybody. I'm actually going to weigh in on this because I run an association that did in-person events, and we have made every change you could possibly make. We probably did about 7 in-person events, maybe 20 total, counting the smaller ones. This has totally transformed what we've done. Things I've learned is we've done a daily touch-up, and so everybody sees everybody every day, and it's really, really helped produce some things. We do 2 events a week at least. This week we do 3, plus we have 32 project teams. We are booked to the end of the year on all of our events. We are so much more productive this way. It is surprising, and I've learned a lot of things. One thing Alan said, I had the same problem. I'm so booked. I scheduled downtime. I got to schedule taking a break.
Yep.
I got to go out for a walk. I just put Tom busy. I don't care if you know where I am. I just got to be out of pocket. I've got If I don't do that, I'm like you. I've gotten these splendid spoons. It only takes like 3 minutes to cook. I can like, because I'm like you, I got to eat my lunch. I have to, you have to schedule a break, and nobody's going to care or notice because they look at everybody's schedule. They're all
Yeah.
stacked. It's not even, you can hide in plain sight. Nobody's even going to know, but you need to build in those breaks or we're just going to kill each other. I think also when you're in a different time of your career, like you're just coming on, it's a lot harder to network and get to know people. You know, me, I have a network. Bobby and I go back way back. I'm a little older. You know, I have a network. I've noticed it's a little harder if you're just getting started out. Sometimes that in-person stuff. And Bobby, I don't know how many great ideas we hanging out we had in person. It's hard to replicate that. So I can't wait. I love the efficiency of this system, but I can't wait to get back to that other system of the in-person, because that's where sometimes magic happens. You know, just a random conversation, and you didn't anticipate you're going to run into somebody. You know, walking in the halls of GSA there, Christine. You never know who you're going to run into, and then next thing you know, you have a good conversation. So I don't know, but I think some people are wired up differently. Some people don't care if they ever go in the office. They do their job. They work 8 to 5. They love their heads down all the time, maybe doing programming. I think I want to see some studies. I don't know what the answer is, but this is going to be really fascinating for us this year, toward the latter half of the year when people start going. We're starting to run out of time. Maybe we can, where do we think we're going to be in a year with collaboration? Where's our roadmap going? Maybe looking a little bit ahead. And I'll start off with you, Alan, because I know you're like in the center for everything, and you hear a lot. You know, where these agencies think they're going in a year, and what's going to look different with collaboration.
Well, I would say that the pandemic has definitely accelerated a lot of their activities on cyber and even some of the modernization activities. I mean, if you look at some of the agencies, some did not even have a real telework program beforehand, and this has kind of really forced them to do something now. And I think now we're a year later. Year and a half, almost a year and 3 months later, I think everyone's kind of gotten into that rhythm, the battle rhythm of kind of telework. And I think what everyone was saying earlier is correct. It's going to be very hard to go back to the way it was. I think the new norm is going to be where you'll see agencies of all sizes really doing this hybrid model of work. Now, in terms of you know, where it's going to be or how it's going to happen, that's the big question mark. Will there be a government-wide collaboration tool? I can't tell you. That's like the you know, mysterious egg that has been eluding us for a long time. So
Christine, we got OGP right here. I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah, well, you know, put it this way, it's, you know, there's a lot of great collaboration tools out there, and some of the ones that have been put out by throughout over time for the government have been really good. Like OMB Max is great. I mean, it has a lot of great capabilities, but you know, that whole fact that we all have to have, I think I have 7 or 8 different collaboration clients on my machine. Yeah. You know, it kind of makes it tough. Especially when you have to jump from meeting to meeting to meeting, and it's like, well, which tool am I using, or which thing am I using? I would just love to be able to collaborate with my other colleagues just with one tool, and then say, hey, here's a document. Let's kind of edit it together at one time. So anyway,
Great.
just my wish list, if you want to call it.
No problem. How about you, Christine?
I think Alan is right. I think we're looking towards more collaboration, even if everyone's coming into the office or there's a hybrid. I think a lot of the hangups, especially with interagency collaboration efforts that everyone kind of just dealt with before, they just figured a way around it. People realize that they need to solve that problem. I know there's some pilot projects to look into federating Microsoft Teams so that Alan can talk to Howard and Bobby, maybe me if GSA goes to Microsoft. But you know, they're doing that. Like federation is, everyone's taking a second look at federation. and how to do that securely. So, that's something I think will happen in the not near future, but maybe within a year or so. And then I think, everyone realizes max.gov, while it's very useful, could probably use a little improvement. So there's an effort to improve max.gov because, warts and all, people do use it. It's very helpful for file sharing. A lot of agencies are already paying into it, so why not make it great? And I think, like I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a look towards how to do this in the long term, how to continuously incorporate collaboration tools into our work environment.
Great. How about you, Bobby?
Yeah, I agree with what everyone has to say. I think we could say it's a goal, but I don't think we're going to adopt to a single collaboration platform. I think it'll be important that we articulate some governance policy, however we want to name it, hosting versus participating. There's some awareness right there in education that could help us get through there. I think we have a good opportunities, the smalls, right, Alan, and my colleagues here, some shared service models to help us. I think the federated teams model, there's a lot of interest in that, but that'll take some time and effort, right? But we know it's not a technical problem. We have some technical challenges, right? I think we need to revisit the network. I really do. When we get back, if we're not doing that now, I think that's a real good discussion with the evolution of EIS. So I hope a lot of small enterprise, small or micro agencies are starting that conversation. But yeah, it's not a technical problem. I think we have to work closely with GSA and facilities on rentable versus usable space. I just heard alarming stats: 60% of GSA are out, for civilian agencies, out by 2023. So there's an opportunity for us right now to get it right, to streamline how we can and start leveraging some of the shared service tools and login.gov and the next OMB Max, to continue that effort, right, and try to you'll mitigate this kind of all over the place, right, and try to adopt the best we can. I mean, look at back five years ago, the common operating model. Today we have 3 browsers on our common operating model. I mean, that's changed. Remember, that was for a while we almost had it, but we just can't. So I think that's how collaboration is going to be looked at. Narrow the field, right? High awareness, high education. Let policy be your friend, and start leveraging the tools that are working.
Yeah, we were on the security panel. The same things happened. The collaboration tools. It's like we need to reduce them. We need to kind of consolidate.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be down to 1, but it needs to be down to less than 10. Right. So great, Howard. You get the last word on this issue.
Sure. Well, I'm a CIO and I'm an optimist. I think I'm seeing indications of sort of, through standards-based approaches that we may get a level of integration without necessarily collapsing down to product on the product side, because we're using, APIs and standards for collaboration that all the major tools will buy into. I've seen some very interesting things, coming back to the calendar problem of how some very creative third-party providers have been provided, have been creating additional, if you will, applets that can expose that kind of stuff and maintain the security boundaries. But yet you can send a note and say, hey, here's my calendar, pick a time that works for you. That I'm surprised that even amongst different products allow a level of sort of seamless integration without collapsing down to vendors. So I'm optimistic that through standards, we're going to really actually drive the what we can do from an integration perspective.
Great. Well, thank you all. And Alan, thank you for working with us on this. This is the first of many collaborations we want to do with you. I think it's like, I really have, like I said, we kind of reinvented this format. It's like small agencies, big impact. it's not big ideas, it's actually big impacts. A lot of these agencies are punching above their weight on the impact that they make. Any final words to close the whole program up? No pressure or anything.
The only thing I would say is I have to thank the small and micro agency community. I mean, they really are the driving force for a lot of the successes the community has had in helping to kind of drive some of the changes that OMB and DHS and GSA have made to help accommodate some of the smalls. And I think the community is extremely good, because the only reason why it's actually really good is because of the participation of the community, where everyone is very active, they're engaged, everyone shares information freely, and it's not about, you know, and everyone is willing to help out each other when it comes down to it. That's the key thing. And to be honest, there is one thing I've been a big proponent of, is we shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel 175 times. That's what we do in government. We love reinventing the wheel, but we shouldn't have to, especially for the smalls. So, and if that's one thing that the smalls have done, is we found common ways of even doing a lot of those frameworks, so that it has helped. And it's, again, the community is really the ones that have really driven that. So thank you to any of the smalls that are there. So
great. Well, thank you, Bobby, Christine, Howard, and Alan. Amazing discussion. I learned a lot. And thank you for the audience for participating. Thank you for all the great questions. We got some good comments too about how amazing you all were. So good stuff. And everybody enjoy the rest of their day. Tomorrow we have an event around artificial intelligence, I believe, if we can show that real quick. You know, advancing AI in federal IT virtual summit. So that'll be tomorrow, 1:30 at our normal time in the afternoon. And anyway, everybody have a good rest of the afternoon, and we'll be back. We'll see you later.
Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Good to see everybody. Bye-bye.